our first mental health webinar for this year on Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. It was entitled The Impact of Mental Health. And anyone who knows about the board of directors of this great organization know that we are very passionate about mental health. It is an area of our lives that we must pay more attention to, because some persons or human beings on the whole don't really pay attention to their mental well-being. So hence the reason why it is so important to all of us as we strive and as we seek to develop ourselves and achieve so many things. You must have that balance. You must be mentally well healthy to achieve all the things that you desire to achieve. And I just want to open, just as the last webinar that I did. You know, Christ said that my peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. So do not let your hearts be troubled, nor do not let your hearts be afraid. And when we talk about peace, it refers to hope and reassurance that goes beyond what a fallen world can give to us. Peace that is permanent, and it guarantees your sustainable peace of mind. So I want to welcome to this webinar Ms. Carice Braxton. Carice, welcome to this evening's session. I know that we have been planning behind the scenes for today, and today is finally here.
That's right. That's right.
So welcome, and I know that today's session is going to be a very dynamic session once again, based on the reviews and the comments and questions and feedback that we have been having. And I want to thank God that we are able to address mental health again. And I just want to do a quick recap, if you would allow me to.
Yeah, definitely. And good evening, everyone. Good evening to the members of the credit union, for the wider public, for each and everyone that has tuned in today to be part of our second session on talking about the entanglement of loneliness. And even as we recap on what we spoke on at our last webinar, we were looking at the impact of mental health. And what we explained last time is that sometimes people may think that mental health and mental illness are basically the same thing, but it's a practice and a way of life when we talk about mental health, because mental health is being in that state of wellness, that state of well-being, where we're able to recognize our own abilities and what are some of the things that we can do and incorporate into our life to cope with the stresses that are around us and ensure that we are productive and we are fruitful. Mental illness, on the other hand, is when one of our six executive functions of our brain is being impaired. So whether it's our brain is being tackled in terms of signaling, whether it's on emotional regulation, this is where it is impacted and it significantly disrupts a person's life. So some persons, when we talk about mental illness or mental health, we may think that, okay, that is for them and it's not for me. But when we speak about this topic, it's us examining and evaluating our own lives and seeing how we could practice self-love. And self-love goes beyond just saying, I'm going to treat myself to dinner. I'm going to take the opportunity to go on a vacation and take all my savings and just do that, and that will change my situation. It will give me a peace of mind for the rest of the year or for the rest of my life. Is actually taking doing deliberate activities and incorporating routines that would help us to ensure that we maintain that homeostasis necessary for our lives. And one of the best way in terms of doing that is through practicing self-care or self-love. And With self-love, we're able to identify certain components of our lives, such as respecting one another, respecting ourselves, having self-compassion when things don't go according to plan or how we expect it to be, and knowing that not every single time we may get it perfect. Self-love means in terms of having patience in the process, and in doing that, finding the necessary techniques and strategies that would help us to feel connected to one another or connected to our inner self, as well as to our surrounding and in our environment, to know what is best needed for me at this point in time or even throughout my life. And the things that we practice today, it continues from generation to generation. And this is why mental health is important, because we want to break away some of the erroneous philosophies and erroneous thinkings that we may have had embedded through pain, trauma, and hurt that were existent in our generations before, and start a new cycle of love, harmony, unity, healing, wellness, etc.
That is a very deep recap, and I think that is a good platform for us to jump into the topic for this evening. And it was so intentionally chosen, the entanglement of loneliness. And, you know, while in the planning stage and doing the research, and, you know, thinking about it and just thinking and observing persons, we live in a time that people feel so isolated for so many various reasons. And as one comment said on Facebook, we were created to be sociable. And therefore, when we are isolated, that is where it impacts on our mental health as well. So my first question to you, Carice, as we venture to speak about the entanglement of loneliness. And just for my curiosity, of course, you know, we always talk about entanglement and the web and all these sorts of things. So I said that let me zero in on what entanglement really means. And it says, you know, to involve in difficulties or complicated circumstances from which it is difficult to escape. And therefore, I was then able to relate it to loneliness, because sometimes when we are lonely, we feel entangled, we feel trapped. And sometimes we try to get out of it, but in fighting and trying to come out, we find ourselves sinking deeper and deeper into feeling lonely, to feeling isolated, moving on to depression. So my first question to you this evening, Carice, is what is loneliness?
Okay, so thank you so much for starting off our webinar and setting the tone of understanding what entanglement is and how it ties into loneliness. And in order to effectively answer that question and understanding what loneliness is, I want to take the opportunity to touch on what you said about we are social beings. And as humans, it is our natural instinctual habits and behavior and desire to be connected to one another. And when we feel that we've lost that quantity, or especially that quality of social relationship or social connection, this is where loneliness steps in, because it brings about this distressing feeling. So some researchers would say that loneliness is the social equivalent to physical pain, such as hunger and thirst and actual physical pressures. But loneliness is a social component to it, because when we feel that pain of social disconnection and that hunger and that thirst to feel motivated and appreciated and understood and cared about, it affects our own maintenance. It affects our own perspective, our own view, our own reality of how valuable our life is to others and even for ourselves. And you would have mentioned in terms of is there entrapment, is that entanglement, is where we feel lost and we get deeper and deeper in it, because the impact and the consequences of loneliness when we may have experienced it for a situation and it has developed into part of our perspective of situations, we may lose the fact that being in solitude, which is a healthy thing, having that opportunity to self-reflect, having that opportunity to do that self-introspection, it may be seen as something impossible for someone struggling with feelings of loneliness, because then they become afraid to even think about their inner self or to explore their inner being. So whereas solitude is a bliss, is a blessing, is a great virtue that we need to tap into, taking times away from our schedule just to have the opportunity to self-introspect and self-reflect, loneliness being an entrapment or being an entanglement that we get deeper, and the symptoms and the consequences become more and more severe. We find ourselves not being afraid of being in positions where we are alone or being in positions where we feel isolated. So it will hold us back from understanding who we truly are and embracing the beauties of life, because our perception is being impaired because we feel we don't meet those social needs. And I want to just really reiterate that is not only saying that, well, I don't have friends or I don't have family that I could rely on. But when we speak about loneliness, it is feeling that you're not understood. It's feeling that where you are, you're not cared about, you're not appreciated, you have no one that you could rely on. Even though you may be in a crowded space, you may have come from a big family, you may be in a family, you may still feel loneliness because you feel misunderstood, you feel uncared for.
Well, you touched on maybe 2 or 3 of my questions, and that is not fair, Carice, but that is good. That is good. But I love the explanation or the differentiation that you give between solitude and loneliness, because sometimes in our lives we become so busy, and in our busyness and work and church and children's school activities are pulling us in so many different directions that we need some time for solace. So we need to step back and we need to recharge ourselves. So as we find and we recharge ourselves to be of better service to our loved ones, it is important, and I want persons to understand it is not a selfish move to step back and restore. Because if you remember that Christ went away from the crowd to pray and to recharge, and I think that he was teaching us a lesson there, that sometimes in the midst of all the craziness, of all the busyness, we need to take some time, whether it's just to sit to read a book, whether it's to watch a movie or whatever, for yourself so that you can better serve your loved ones, to take care of them. And then the lonely aspect now is where you feel so empty, so alone. And even in the midst of so many persons around you, whether you are a husband or whether you are a wife, that you can still feel so alone. And how is it possible, Carice, that I can have so many persons around me and yet feel alone? Because, and as you said, it is because I feel misunderstood. I feel that when I speak, no one understands me. No one hears my voice. And sometimes I am talking aloud, or sometimes even though I don't speak, and I become silent hoping that someone will hear me speaking in my silence and ask me what is wrong and be honest with me. So the loneliness and it is a bit of a mystery that you can be in a relationship, be it a husband and a wife and a husband, be it a normal friendship, and still feel so alone. How is that possible? And how can an individual being in a relationship deal with such loneliness? And I have a question that I have to ask from the Q&A, but after that, we would ask that question from an anonymous person.
Okay. So how persons could find themselves being trapped in loneliness, even though they may be in a relationship, they may be part of a romantic relationship, they may be part of a family. And it stems from in terms of feeling emotionally distant from the people that are around them. So, for example, you may be in a romantic relationship, but that connection, that intimacy, that involvement, that sense of, okay, he understands me, that may be distant. So that emotional distance makes individual impacts in terms of how persons may see or may feel or experience loneliness within a relationship. It also arises when there are communication challenges. So, for example, there's no direct conversation as to what is impacting me or what is impacting our relationship, what is impacting those that are around me. And I'm very, very much thankful that this generation likes to build on that self-awareness. But 2 generations before that, or even before that, like my parents and my parents' parents, they don't talk about their problems. Everything was always a secret.
Yes.
They don't discuss about family issues or any struggle that the person may be going through, because that is not for your children to know. That is not their business. They keep everything a secret. Even if you enter into adulthood and you two are struggling with the same things that they were struggling with, it is not discussed. And when we have this communication challenge, not saying that we don't know how to articulate our feelings, but not having that opportunity where we could really open up, where we could even have that conversation, it brings about those feelings of loneliness. And even when these opportunities to communicate occurs, there are the negative emotions attached to it, where you're gaslighted, you're belittled, you're intimidated, and because you made yourself vulnerable. So you feel fearful to allow that to happen again. And this may have stemmed from previous relationships. It may have stemmed from previous romantic relationships, or even previous family background and family settings. It may have stemmed from that. And in that, it is trickled down into the other relationship we develop. And specifically for romantic relationship, it could also stem from that intimacy issues. So, for example, persons withdraw themselves from one another, or there may be some medical challenges in performing certain intimacy act, or even how a child, adult may have grown up without love and security and care, expressing that in an intimate way, in a positive, intimate way, could be a very much of a challenge, and there the disconnect also comes. So these are some of the ways in which loneliness manifests itself in relationships, and it's existent in relationships through some of these factors.
So one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is that self-awareness and really being honest with yourself of who you are, how you feel, and being brave enough maybe to talk. Well, you spoke about the gaslighting, and we know how that goes, and stigma, people's putting a stigma on people, and especially men, opening up and saying exactly how they feel at any particular time. But I think with sessions like these, it would give people the strength, and this is the hope behind it, to give people the strength and the courage to truly tap into themselves, understand who you are, and be brave enough to speak about, whether it's to your partner, whether it's to a friend. I am lonely, and I feel lonely because of X, Y, and Z. And the more that I try to get out of my loneliness, is the more that I sink into it. When you were speaking, one of the things that came to my mind in terms of being lonely, and especially in an intimate setting, could it be that sometimes we choose the wrong persons to form a relationship with because we do not understand the difference of being alone and being lonely, or because we are lonely, we think that we must rush in to a relationship to fill that void or that depression, and in doing so, we make the wrong choice in a partner. And hence the reason why I am lonely. So I'm in a relationship thinking that that would have resolved the problem, but I have made a wrong choice, and therefore now I am in a relationship where I feel even more lonely.
So when you asked that question, it just brought me back to my days when I used to do sex therapy and sex counseling for couples. And oftentimes, because of loneliness, because of that fear of feeling that I would be all alone for the rest of my life, we make desperate decisions.
Yes.
And in these desperate decisions, we go and gravitate towards persons that is giving us the attention that we desire. And we all understand in terms of that dating stage, that courting stage, where we getting to know one another, what we tend to do is we will put up the best foot forward. We will put on our nice black suit, slick back the hair, come with all the right English, come smelling the perfect and the best way. We present ourselves in the most effective way, that there's never any flaws, there's never any issue, and I am going to make you believe, or I'm going to allow you to see me as the person that you need. And we don't take the opportunities to notice that the reason, firstly, the reason why we've entered into seeking partnership or intimacy or creating relationship with someone is because we're lonely and we're looking for someone to hide us away from those feelings of loneliness. So that's the first thing. if it is you enter into a relationship and you take the opportunity to ask yourself, why did I really enter into a relationship with this person? And if your answer is because I went through a bad breakup and I was feeling hurt and sad and this person came and rescued me, it is a high possibility that that was a wrong choice because an individual didn't take that time to seek healing, to heal those wounds of that past relationship or that past situation. And it may not be, okay, I came out of a bad relationship with X. It could be that I had a hard childhood. I had poor relationships growing up within a family unit. And because my daddy wasn't there, and oftentimes we see this with female individuals and even male individuals, when that father figure is missing in that family household, it makes individuals more vulnerable in seeking validation, finding identity, seeking love. So you will see in terms of like young ladies, when they are with older men, you may be asking, how she end up with this person?
Yes.
And most times it's because they're looking for a father figure. And I'm saying, and I would remove the term most times, but there are times where we could reflect that is because they're seeking for that father figure. And they subconsciously, they're not aware of that, you know. They're consciously, they're not aware of it, but subconsciously, our decisions are acting in that part. So it's really taking that opportunity to assess why did I enter into the first place before we make that decisions? Where am I at in my life? I am at a place where I am thriving, that I am sure about me. This is a decision I'm making for the benefits of my future or my past, or is it just for satisfaction, that temporary satisfaction? Is it just for companionship, solely companionship? So this is where we had to assess the why into why are we in this relationship? Why are we looking to enter into a relationship from that place? And as we started today's webinar, we spoke about that we are social beings. We need that sense of connection. There are certain theorists who connotates intimacy or sex as a basic need that the body desires. So just as we need food, clothing, and shelter, we also need sex. And that's a particular theorist who may have shared that. And because we may need that desire for touch and feel connected on that level, we may always find ourselves running to another person. So you may have individuals, they're never single. It's one relationship to the next or multiple relationships because that one individual cannot satisfy that desire or that connectiveness that they need because they feel so disconnected with self and with reality and with the surrounding and the environment that they have. So you may see persons gravitating towards just looking for physical connection through that social medium. And we can't find ourselves going with the wrong person. But I'm also here to say that in every relationship, it provides evolving of individuals together. So even though it may have started off with wrong intentions or at a bad place, it isn't too late for an individual to seek their own healing, as well as for as a couple examining how we can work together and learn from each other. Because a person who just started a relationship, started a marriage without children, now kicking off their career, still finding themselves financially, still understanding their identity and their position in life, and they come into a marriage, they are one particular person at the beginning, but 10, 15 years down the road, both individuals have developed and changed and evolved and moved from one phase to the other. So it doesn't mean that because I'm a different person 15 years down the road that I no longer want you. We are always growing, we always evolving, we're always developing. And the same applies like for emotional intelligence. We can never reach a state of, okay, I'm perfectly emotionally intelligent. It is always a process of us growing as individuals. So even though it may start off as a bad decision at that point in time, we could still grow and develop that intimacy, develop that appreciation and that love for one another as we continue to identify through self-awareness that, okay, this was a reason for, as well as looking at how we could work on that. And probably your next question would be, how could couples work on building that, working away from that loneliness, right? Should I jump into the strategies or should I wait?
Let me, I mean, I was going to say you can jump right in, but allow me to draw to your attention, and afterwards we will go into that. The two questions in the chat, and this is from an anonymous attendee, and he or she says, how do you help a lonely elderly man not being able or willing to go out? And then while you were speaking, it says, he or she said, yes, that is my daddy. And although he admitted his loneliness, he is not willing to confide in his sole caretaker, his daughter. The speaker is talking about him.
Oh, wow. Loneliness is a serious concern for the elderly population.
Yeah.
So there are two main groups that are mainly affected by loneliness: our children, and it lessens as we grow up in our adult life. And then when we reach to that stage of being older persons or in that elderly stage, we recognize that it is a major concern. And there was an island-wide survey for persons over the age of 65 in Trinidad and Tobago here. It was done in 2002, where some researchers in Trinidad, they took the opportunity to understand how loneliness may be impacting the elderly population. And it was recognized that we as a country have evolved and developed as an industrial country, where we've moved away from that traditional setting where everyone grows up together, everybody lives close to each other. And when we get older, it is automatic that we're there for one another. We're there to provide that love, that support. Our presence is always there. But now where persons move away from the home, and migration is a big thing in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, we're seeing that there's a larger number of aged people living alone. And even if they have caretakers or even have family members taking care of them, they do recognize that loneliness is a big concern for them, especially even among the female group. Because even in this study, they said there's a particular aged woman. She shared that it is not easy being an older person in Trinidad and Tobago. And why is that? Is because they feel that they don't have the respect from the younger generation. They struggle financially because they can't make ends meet to meet the demands of their own life, and the healthcare challenges, but definitely loneliness plays an integral part in it. So in the elderly, sorry.
As you gave that explanation there, it goes back to what you would have said earlier. Being an elderly person or people from our generation, it is not easy for us to talk about how we feel or to confide in someone about how we feel about any particular situation that we are going through. So we keep it all inside, or maybe we might be saying, well, okay, fine. Carice is younger than me. How can I confide in someone that is much younger than I am about how I am feeling and what I am going through? So dealing with the elderly, I think that maybe, okay, fine, it is a lack of trust, of not trusting, or sometimes, based on what you said with the lady, is persons or young people not showing enough love and care and affection so that they themselves, the elderly, would feel that, listen, even though this person may be younger than I am, because of that sense of maturity and love and care and concern, I can feel it is okay for me to open up and speak to them, because some young people feel they would never get older. Anyway, back to you.
And you bring forward a great point in terms of younger persons not realizing that they too would get older. And we may say, well, I will put things in place. I wouldn't be like my parents expected me to take care of them or expect me to not live my life. They lived their life already, and now is my time to live my life. Their children, big, they've completed what they needed to do in their life. They are how much years old? Now is my time to live my life. But as much as we want to say, okay, we will prepare, this is where the love and respect and the compassion comes in. Because regardless of what endeavors we are endeavoring, and I speak to this on a personal level, because I do understand what it's like in terms of seeking support and caring for a parent or caring for an elderly family member. I do understand how it can be challenging, especially seeking to start off our own life, our own family life, etc. But you see that love and knowing that they have people that they could rely on, and not hearing the complaints that oh God, why you have to get on so? You're so hard and you're like a little child. And this is where we have to empathize, because the cycle of life, it's perfect, but yet still it could be challenging, because we're once a man and twice a child. And beyond our own control, we may, because of our body may go down in age, because of how we may not be the same person in terms of strength, we no longer have the opportunity to be that person to take care of you. And now we have to reciprocate you being there for me. It is hard for even the parent to adjust to, and even for the child to adjust to, because the child would always see mommy or daddy as mommy or daddy, and they will not see them as my mommy is now in a position where I may have to be not mommy or daddy, but I may have to follow some of the practices they would have imparted and given to me, because now they need that care from me. They need that support from me. And it is not the responsibility, and I'm not saying this in any negative way whatsoever, but the person in which we should expect them to build that relationship with is their family. Because if we speak about that generation where they don't trust anybody, trust me, they wouldn't trust a caregiver who is there to take the money, who is just only there because of paid service in certain person's mind. When they see we are consistently caring and concerned about them, when we're showing that we're always showing up and we're treating them with love and not allowing the position and the state that they've reached become a weapon against them, then we would see that sense of joy coming back. And simple thing as bringing the grandchildren around, because again, once a man, twice a child. You would always see older persons having such affinity and love and care for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. The love and the excitement that they would have for them, it may have been never seen in our childhood or in your childhood. So even if it is you don't want to build a connection, even I want to don't want it is important not just to build a connection as parent to child, but even bring the grandkids, bring the great grand, let them spend time with them. It will do great.
And as you mentioned that, you know, you would often hear people say, And they would even tell their mommy or their daddy, but I never used to get away with that long time. And the grandchild is doing the same thing, being mischievous. And the grandparent will say, leave the child alone. Don't tell him nothing. Come, come. You know, you left in amazement, but okay. I used to be scolded for doing this when I was small. So now that I am disciplining the child for the same thing, there's mommy or daddy telling the child, come. And they say, don't hit my child, you know.
Yeah.
And it was
I see that all the time, and I will always tell persons don't get in the way of grandparents and their grandchildren.
yes,
Grandparents their role is to spoil their grandchildren. Don't take that
grandchildren
away from them.
from
Don't
them
take
at
that
all.
away from them at all.
And one of the things that when you were talking a little while ago about trust and young people respecting the elderly and showing them the love and compassion, it brought me back to a memory when my mother was alive, if I may share. And I was her caregiver, and because we were so close and we shared that bond and that love, I remember her sometimes being afraid, being uncomfortable at times. And once I'm around, she's at ease. And I remember she felt as though she was a burden. And I literally told her, you know, Mommy, when I was young, when I was a young adult, you took care of me. So now it is my turn to take care of you, right? I am the parent now. So you relax and you don't have to worry about anything. And anytime she felt like if there's a conversation with other people or somebody passed and maybe told her something, all she had to do was to look at me. And when she looked at me, I know what she was saying because of the bond that we had. And I would look at her, and my look at her will tell her it is all right, all is well. No one can do you anything once I am around. And I think that is the kind of love and attention and appreciation that we can show our elderly, that they will feel that kind of security, that kind of safety net around them, knowing that their loved one is there regardless. I just want to jump into a question that I'm seeing here. Ooh. As the unusual strong one, how do I tell my family that I am secretly struggling with depression? And I don't know if I can quickly read through this one here and then we can jump into it. The person said, good night. How to overcome loneliness at home when you live with family members that are toxic, abusive, and disrespectful, etc. I do not communicate with most of my family members at home since they have mistreated me over the years, and I pulled away from them about 2 years ago, and I have left and I have felt very lonely even though we live in the same house. Also, I have 1 or 2 friends, but I rarely hear from them, and I go out by myself a lot, but I am unable to enjoy myself because I feel lonely and sad when I look around and see other people with their friends and family. How can I deal with this loneliness? Wow.
Yeah. And these are real questions. These
Yes.
are real concerns. And is not for us to invalidate or think, oh, that is simple, that could be treated. No, these are real concerns, and I'm really appreciative for persons asking these questions in this forum, because there may be many others listening who may be afraid to even ask the question and now hear what support can be provided and needed. So firstly, if you have family members that care about you or even notices you, if you're saying you're secretly struggling with depression, I wrote it down and I'm circling the word secretly, because
Yeah.
we may think we're having it undercovered. Our skeleton remains in the closet.
Yes.
Nobody knows, but they know. They would see. They would see the changes in our behavior. They would see the withdrawal. They would see the sadness. They would see the sadness in our eyes, in our body, in the way we speak. And one of the greatest way of overcoming any form of battle or even being in that place, because depression is a thing that makes us feel so disempowered, makes us feel that our self-worth is at the bottom of the white line of the road.
Yes.
And when we take the opportunity to speak up, to share how we feel, how we impacted, that is one of the greatest ways of building empowerment back to ourselves. So even though we may think that secretly nobody knows, people who are paying attention, they would see it. And each situation is different. So your family dynamics, you may come from a close-knitted family, and once you disclose that, everyone will band together or continue to band together and provide you that support that you need in sharing that details on how it is impacting. But then not everyone may have that luxury of having the opportunity to be guaranteed that you may get that positive response or that positive support. And this is where, depending on the state that we may be at, if we could speak to a counselor or speak to someone or even a professional, or speak to someone that we know that could guarantee providing us with the right guidance and strengthening us to not necessarily holding our hand to that next part of that, to enter into that journey, but having that person that could, we have that assurance that I could share, this is what I'm experiencing. And that when you share with that person is not from a place of judgment, it will remain confidential. It will provide a support. If you want to start off by sharing it with that particular individual or reaching out for that particular support from a professional, so they could guide you through the process of how, with that, they can help you prepared for that announcement. And sometimes the announcement may not necessarily be first to our family members. The announcement has to be with ourselves first. And this is where we may need to unearth, where is this depression stemming from? How could I move away from struggling to coping, to living, if it is a clinical situation that we're in, a diagnosed clinical depression? What could be done in terms of treating with these symptoms and bringing me to a state of wellness? How could I address these things and do the necessary stuff that would bring me that healing? So it's seeking to address the sadness, the loneliness. And some researchers actually are convinced that loneliness is synonymous with depression because the symptoms are similar. So it would mean that we're looking at what can we do to address what the root of the problem is, and tightening that social connection with individuals that we know we could get as support. So just to reiterate the point that I was making for that concern, how do I tell my family? They may already know. So just tell them. But if you are concerned about how they may receive it, or if it may be more harmful or crucial, find that professional, find that person that you could rely on. And I think Traveler was trying to make the point that she may not have that friend. In the statement she may have made, she do not have that friend. May not have friends, but we don't need to have friends to be the ones that we could confide in. And this could jump into the second question with coming from a toxic, abusive family, and they don't have friends that they could trust and rely on. Social support comes in many different forms and many different fashion. So we were actually doing a session on speaking about this actual topic recently. And we don't need to have that one confidant, that individual, my bestie, to say we have somebody that we could talk to. We may be involved in different social groups. And these social groups could be a hiking group, and this is where we build friendship. We could be in a sip and paint group, and they do a lot of activities throughout each country. We be part of that group. We could be part of a religious group, where there's a church group. We don't want to be part of the whole church. We could be part of a women's group, a youth group. We could be part of a men's group. Find these different circles. If it is we're timid and shy, to find individual people or allocate or look for different individual persons that we can build that trust with. Start off in a group setting. Acquaint yourself in these different social settings, and acquaint yourself in social settings that meet your interests and your hobbies. It's not just saying, well, I would go on in the mall and I'll watch who passing by. Put yourself, if you're big on parenting, be part of your child's PTA group. And there's a high possibility you may connect with parents who could relate to you on that level as a professional and seeking the best interests as your child. If you're big on your spiritual values, be active in your church. You may or your temple or your mosque. You may just go to church on a Sunday, but you're not involved whatsoever. But get involved, understanding different missions and goals and the things that are being done in these different social circles. And one of the things that I aspire to be part of when I get older is the Senior Activity Center. So this is a group where older persons meet and they go all over, and they are the most active group. Every single one, because I did practicum in different centers, and they do Zumba, they do dancing, they do aerobics, water sport, they travel all over the world. They are active, and I just can't wait when I get older to be part of this. So start off with that social group. And even if you are at a place where you that may not, you try different things. And another thing, and I always share what someone had shared with me, they say that when they're stressed out and they really need somebody to talk to without judgment, they would go to a place where nobody knows them. So whether it's the square in Port of Spain where everyone is sitting playing checkers, or whether it's some random area where people are just sitting and eat in a food court where nobody knows you, and they would start conversations with individuals. And in starting those conversations, they're able to unearth what they're going through, because they know they may not see this person again. And these people will give them the most genuine responses, because they don't have no reason to please them. They don't know them from anywhere. They will give them the honest response. And another strategy that we could use in terms of building friendships and relationships is taking the opportunity to ask God to guide you to bring the right people into your life. Because there are things that are out of our control and out of our power, but the things that we seek and we affirm to manifest itself through prayer or through our words or positive words, it will make its way towards us. And if valuable friendship is one of the things that you're desiring and seeking, set out affirmations, say prayers, ask God to guide you to know who is the right people in your life, who is the right people to get rid of, because we may assume that certain people are backing and have our genuine support, but it may not be so, because it's difficult because some persons are on their own self-interest. So it's asking God to guide who are these people, and we may not have the luxury of choosing who our family members are, but let's just start with where we are at and what we could choose and how we could build our own circle and building that trust and support from those individuals that we could choose to allow to be in our life.
I really do like that answer. And one of the things that was going through my mind, you know, you're living in a toxic environment, an abusive environment, and you have to come home to it every day, suffering with depression, and you're doing all of that. But while you were building new friendships, you know, it's how do you live or work in a hostile environment? While you are building your friendship, you still have to come home to it, come home to the abuse, come home to the distrust. But for yourself and your peace of mind, how does one function in a hostile environment? So if I am not an extrovert, I'm an introvert, and I really don't want to meet people at this point in my life, how do I function and safeguard myself from this abuse, this toxic environment?
So there's a song, I think, from Tasha Cobbs. It said, "Fill me up, fill me up."
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the things that we could do is find things that would fill our cups up. Find things that would bring us joy, bring us happiness, bring us peace. And I'm coming from that angle because I want to give you this example, right? When we meet somebody new and we are at that first stage of falling in love,
Mm-hmm.
the world could be on fire. Things could be going wrong no matter where we turn. But this joy, this newfound, it keeps us glowing. And nothing could spoil our day. Nothing could spoil our
It's the world.
Yes, we're walking on cloud 9, 10, 11, and 55.
Yes.
And our stress is dependent on our perception of our situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not invalidating that the situation in itself is stressful, but the severity of the stress is dependent on our perception of the situation.
And because sometimes we are overthinking the situation. Yeah?
That's absolutely correct. And I always advise people, the things that are in your control, do something about it. And doing something about it often means that there are certain components within my life or certain attributes or behavior that I may possess that I may need to work on, or things that I may need to do to ensure that I could get the result that I need. So the things that are in your control, you deal with that. But the things that are not within your control, if you're a person of faith, leave it up to God. Let him fix it. Or you just leave it. Don't lose sleep over it. Don't stress over it. And just hope one day it works itself out how it's supposed to work out. But the things that I could control, let me feel empowered because I'm doing my part on this end. But what I cannot control, that's beyond me. I cannot change the person. I cannot cause them to see life the way I see it. Then no, I can't do nothing about, I cannot do anything about that. So it means that I just do what I could do. And our perception, and I reiterate, our perception of a stressful situation plays an integral part. Because we spoke about, in terms of when we talk about mental health, there are certain things that trigger stress responses. And when we are in certain settings because of hurt, unforgiveness, resentment, pain, trauma, it affects how we perceive a situation. The situation is bad, but if it is, we realize that I am working on me because it stemmed from various factors, and where I could work on that area, let me work on that and focus on, like a therapist once shared with us when we were doing clinical debriefing. He shared one thing he encouraged his clients to do when they're in a situation where it is toxic, where they feel that they can't change the system. He encouraged them to start a hobby, get something to get them preoccupied, that could preoccupy their mind. Get something that will cause them not to focus on the issue. And when I say not focus on the issue, focus on the things they have no control over, and
Yes.
allow your mind to be focused on something that brings you joy, that brings you hope, that brings you that mental wellness. Focus on those things instead.
Yeah. So it's all about taking your paintbrush and your many colors of life that God has given to you and start painting your own destiny. And I think sometimes we must also understand, because loneliness leads to depression, leads to mental issues, and it also leads to a sense of hopelessness. Am I really going to achieve anything in life? And sometimes that, am I really going to achieve anything in life, has nothing to do with academics or a good job, because you could be in a good job, could be extremely bright, and still be very lonely, still suffering from loneliness, depression, feeling empty, feeling alone, and wondering, how am I going to achieve the happiness and the joy, the fulfillment, good friends, good family that I so desire? And I think one of the things that we have to realize and understand is that our hurts and our pain, our wounds, will not stop our destiny, what God has created us to be and to achieve. And once we understand that, and understand that the hurts, the pains, the wounds are lessons, learn the lessons, trust your anointing, understand who you are, then that beautiful picture that you are painting will finally come to fruition. I have two questions in the chat that I would go to, but I want to thank Ms. Cheryl Forbes for her patience, and I would now invite her to ask her question. Travlon, could you unmute her mic so that she can ask the question that she so desires? Thank you. Ms. Cheryl Forbes, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. Good night to the panel. I'm really enjoying this session. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
All right. I want to thank you. I'm really enjoying this session, and I'm thinking about all the situations that you talk about and the people, I'm reflecting on them. But I want to find out, I came from the long time. You would have spoken about some of those days. And but I can't remember in my village people being lonely, simply because on evenings, the ladies will come together and chit chat. And, or there was always a women's group where there were some activities where the women would meet and do some craft or something like that. And they would discuss, little issues they might have. And as a young child, I would be with my mother, and they would talk about, probably something that is happening at home, and the other woman will either advise accordingly there was always that kind of a support. I learned to be kind through my mother because as the ladies got older, the neighbors, she would send to how they going. If there is a meal, she would send a meal to Shara, go get the meal to them, that kind of thing. Is it that because our society is changing and people, it's fast now that we have so many people who are lonely. They are not able to deal with some issues. I heard someone talk about a toxic family. Every member of my family went to a different school, who went to San Fernando, different schools. So we couldn't see eye to eye because it's like we grew up in a different environment. And yes, I couldn't communicate with them. Yeah. And so, but I found friends and people who I was able to be able to share my concerns and whatnot. And I believe it was God. It was prayer, it was God, because I was also involved in church. So I just want to, based on what I'm seeing, and the point is because because of the media, because of the change in society, we have so many people who are lonely. Even within the church, you have people who, I would hear people talk about their loneliness, and then you don't have that kind of yes, it's a church, yes, but you don't always have those people who would have gone through a certain situation, who are mature enough to be able to identify with some of the problems that you're going through. So, what are your thoughts in terms of that? Because I don't think about, I get myself involved in things. I have hobbies, I have friends, I have so many things that, that I just don't have time to feel alone. And I am an elderly person. I was a former educator. I'm retired now. And I live by myself, but I also always have my family coming in. And because I built a relationship with them when they were younger, my nephews and nieces, and they always call, they always drop in, that kind of thing. So, I'm trying to understand the fact that of the loneliness. Please help me to understand.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Forbes, and I really do love and appreciate your contribution. And one of the things, your opening line is that long time in your days, you really didn't have loneliness because everybody came and together and everybody would chit chat and just putting in a little how to say it, banter here. When the ladies came together, they came together to battle the husbands, right? What he not doing, and I ask him to do so and so long, and whatever, he taking your own time. So I really enjoyed your contribution. So Karis, let's deal with that, about loneliness in society and persons not really. One of the things that came up in my mind though is the word trust.
Mm-hmm.
That word came to my mind when Ms. Forbes was speaking the word trust, because sometimes you want to make friends and you may make friends, or you may disclose certain issues that you're going through, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows sometimes before you put down the phone or before you sit down with someone, you're going through something and you haven't even left the room and somebody else knows what you have discussed in confidence with another individual. So that is why that word came up, trust.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of trust, does it cause loneliness?
So
deal with Ms. Forbes' question.
Yeah, I want to touch on Ms. Forbes' question
yes.
first, Because Ms. Forbes, I wish our society was how it was. And people may go against, because we're advancing in technology, we're advancing as a people, we're developing independence and empowerment and all these things. And I do appreciate, and I am sharing my personal view. But oftentimes I wish we had that community again, because in that dispensation, the community was family and everybody was looking out for each other. It wasn't, I'm involved in this church community or this community. The community encompassed everything: family, social life, religious life. It touched on all the pillars of society, touched on all. And that community allowed us to know that we had that social connection. So you were right. We were not out there struggling on our own. And one of the things that has been advocated and pushed and idealized is the nuclear family: mommy, daddy, children, and a puppy, right? Living in the white picket fence. And this term nuclear family began the disruption of the community, where everyone now is looking to move away from the community and start their nuclear family. And in moving away, we lost connection and we lost communication and lost that touch with the support we would get. Because that time, my sugar could run out and I could run to my neighbor and say, yeah, I could get a little bit of sugar to stew my chicken. Or if I don't have something, then and the neighbor have it, is just as equal as mine. And everyone would come together looking out for children. And it was never at a cost. If a part of my house had to be rebuilt, it was everybody come together. The most you had to do is cook a pot of food and have some drinks, and it's going to happen. But no, it's not like that. And those times, people were genuinely looking out for one another. It wasn't how could I benefit or profit off of your wealth. And this is because we've moved from a subsistence society where we try to do things within our own community, sustain our lifestyle and sustain ourselves. Because that time women were not working, men may be working, and it may not be, depending on the community you grew up in or the family you grew up in. The male maybe would be the main provider. Women were not working, and it wasn't about who had more money than the other to have a better quality of life. It was more about how we are coming together and making sure everyone in the community is okay in some form or some fashion. But now we move from that subsistence society into that industrialized society, where everything now is paid support. I call simple thing as your neighbor's child may be going to the same school as my child, and I still have to pay a maxi to drop my child to school. An example, as opposed to automatically, it would be, we have that relationship. I would pick up your child for you, and we do these things. We support one another. So this is where we may find ourselves having to rely on where the money matches, as opposed to where the heart matches. And it comes into that area of trust, because now, where people genuinely are not looking for anything in return, we're just being supportive. We're out here surviving. As opposed to supporting, we're surviving. We're surviving to make sure we pay our bills at the end of the month. We're surviving to make sure our children go to school and have get a good education. We're surviving to make sure we could cover what is expected of us financially, and the cost of living continues to raise, and we lose touch with one another. We lose that connection because we're busy surviving. And even when we try to build trust in individuals, there are levels of skepticism, because we may think that because we're all surviving is more about how is this going to benefit me in reaching my goal? And we see it often. We see it in terms of if what I want contradicts with what you want, then there's no support then. But the thing is, TD spoke about the different type of people that you may come in contact with in your life. There are people who are for what you're for, and they are only there when you guys are on the same page with advocating or pushing or going towards and leaning towards achieving something particularly. There are people who are against the things that you are against. So you may be upset with a particular situation, and this is where you guys could come together to go against the things that you guys don't like. And then there are the people that who you could consider your confidant. They're there with you through the good, the bad. They're really there for you, not what they could get from you, but they're there for you as an individual. So the people who are for what you're for, they may be with you just for a period of time until they achieve what they want. Like, for example, some of our college friends or university friends or our co-workers, we may be very best buddies when we're on work, but if we leave the job, then that connection goes away, and we may not keep that relationship afterwards because we were for the organization working together, again, a paycheck. But then there may be people who are against some of the things that we're against. So we may be against the supervisor, we may be against a certain family member. And this is where we'll come together just about talk that individual. But you're confident, it doesn't matter what angle you're going at, they're there for you. And how would you know that? Is, for example, if somebody genuinely cares about you and your success, take the opportunity when you're sharing good news about yourself. Let's just say you got a promotion, or you're excited because you finally got approval from Westview Credit Union for that mortgage for your house, and you're saying, yes, I got my papers. I'm going to get my new house. I'm so happy. The struggle was real. And while you're saying that, in your excitement, take the opportunity to watch their response. How do they react? Is it a genuine smile? Is it a look away, a grudge, their head sink into their chest? Look how they initially respond when you share that good news. And you will know people that genuinely look out for you when it is you're in a stressful situation as well. Because stress brings out the best in individuals. You see people through identity. When things don't go our way, watch how that person reacts to you. And don't just take it for granted where they say, I was just stressed out. I didn't mean what I said or how I reacted. Take these things as learning opportunities to know in terms of how to build that trust, who to trust, and what are some things we could do in terms of knowing how to sustain trust, because trust in itself is something that could take years to build, and it could take a second to lose, and take years again to rebuild again. So right. Trust is integral.
It is. So I see, Kerry, that you answered my question there one time. Brilliant about the trust. And you know, while you were talking and about persons being there for you, and persons, you know, they say something, or they may show you something and they say, oh, no, that's not what I really meant. And because of whatever, you know, the Bible is very clear. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yeah? I want to jump to the questions in the chat. I'm going to, wow, I'm enjoying this. All right, let me go up. All right. And this question is from Viva Romeo. How do you help a parent whose loneliness evolves into depression Also, how do you deal with a parent who is dependent on you for happiness, and sometimes the level of support is never enough. They look to the child for joy and companionship and complains if the child is unavailable. I have 4 others, but let's see how we can answer Romeo's question, and then we will go on to the others.
So Romeo, I understand that where you're coming from, because our parents would have spent their entire life dedicated towards parenting, especially if they were stay-at-home moms. For example, if they were stay-at-home, they would have dedicated their life to family life. And now that the children is older, now that everyone is moved out or everyone is striving to make their own, the parent in itself feels that inadequacy, where now the relationship has switched because they would have dedicated that pruning process, that growing process. And even as the children got older, the parent built a relationship and a friendship with the children. And we see in terms of these situations, especially when parents may be at that stage of their life where they're rethinking some of their decisions and maybe living in regret and suffering from their own self-esteem issues, that they cast blame on their children for attention. So just like a child who wants attention from their parents, and the only way they could get attention is by acting up, we find our parents doing the same thing, where they would they threaten us, remind us of all the things they did for us. They make us feel that we're not doing enough, and they make us feel hurt. And this is where the empath person comes in, that child who realizes that, okay, now I need to change my situation, or I would say mommy, because oftentimes we will see it more so the maternal figure doing this, or daddy. So you may find yourself, because you're empathic, because you're the one that the parent know that they could come and vent to, share their problems with, share their pain, share how things are not working out, we step in and say, you know what, I am going to fix this for mommy, or I'm going to fix this for daddy. I'm going to bring everybody who is the issue and have a conversation about this, and I'm going to address this situation. And when you address the situation, you realize that mommy didn't want to change anything. Mommy didn't want the situation different in any way, but they wanted to use the opportunity to vent how they feel, how stressed they are. And the reason for it may not be only because of challenges with self-esteem or that sense of loneliness, because they themselves may be going through their own loneliness, and they will know to gravitate because this particular child is the one that I know I could rely on, the one I could talk to, the one I could trust. It could also mean in terms of us being at a certain stage of their life. And menopause is a topic that is often left unspoken of, and the psychosocial, emotional impact menopause may have on women is something that we may take for granted, because now where women are now going through this hormonal imbalance, you would see the issues of managing these mood swings and the emotional distress and I can't stand this woman, she going through menopause response. We take for granted as well that impact that menopause may have on women, and it may impact us negatively too, because they are going through their own experiences. And one of the things that we encourage persons in that position is understanding that we need to set clear boundaries as well. If you know that you are being used as event and block, if you know that you feel emotionally drained every time they call to complain, and not really seek for that support, genuinely seek for the input of change of that what you're bringing, this is where you could set those healthy boundaries. And in that, you know that, okay, not every day we're going to entertain conversations about complaints. Let's go out and have fun. Let's do something differently, so that it will not only be that kind of heavy interaction. So each individual know how they could set those boundaries and establish those lines of respect as well, because we don't want to come across or don't want to exhibit behaviors of disrespect to our loved ones. So we're not going to lash out and tell them why you can't change your ways, why to do that, as well as understand that they too may be experiencing some loneliness. So if there's some social senior activity centers around your community you want to encourage them to be a part of, or some women's group or something like that, that you could keep them engaged in, and they use that forum to use that energy towards that, because there's a possibility that they are lonely as well. So look at what are some effective ways that could work for you. But the first thing that needs to be established are clear boundaries. And these boundaries are done with respect and with love. And oftentimes the child that experiences that is the most empathic child, the child who feels sorry a lot and wants to be that person to listen and to care and to make a difference, but is understanding. And two, that if this is taking a negative impact on you, take the opportunity to see what could be done to refuel you if you are to have these conversations, as well as setting boundaries and knowing how you expose yourself in these discussions as well, and creating avenues for them to get some kind of relaxation as well. I hope I was able to answer the question. Mark, do you think I gave it enough justice?
I would say yes. I would say yes. I have a question that came up in my mind when you were talking. Okay, life in itself is a journey. It's a beautiful journey with many twists and turns, ups and downs. But as a parent, mommy or daddy, how do I prepare myself for when my children are leaving the nest? And maybe mommy and daddy would be home alone, or mommy is alone because mommy, daddy may have passed on or whatever. But how do I prepare myself on that journey so that I would not come across to my child or my children as being complaining or having them feel burdened because of how I am feeling? But I realize that, okay, my child or my children have to go and form and build their own family. So in the transition stages, in the growing stages, as mommy or daddy preparing themselves for when that time comes, and maybe just acting now and letting that child know that I'm here for you and acting as a support instead of just feeling all alone. How does one prepare themselves?
So one of the things our organization do with persons entering into retirement, we have some pre-retirement planning. And I'm speaking from this angle, which ties into the family life. Because oftentimes where you would see in terms of planning for pre-retirement allows us to have an introspection of, or even a wide view of how to prepare when now I'm realizing I have more free time on my hands because I'm no longer gainfully employed. And I need to find things to keep, not just to keep myself occupied, but adjust, because now this is a different phase or transition into our lives, and we'll apply the same thing when our children are older. They have completed university, university or just starting their life. They become adults and they're on their own, they're doing their own, right? And one things we focus on is that psychological component where we provide counseling for these individuals to psychologically prepare for that transition. And the same thing for family. When it is real, we have to be prepared that one day my children would leave. One day my children would start their own family, and it may just be me and my husband home alone. And psychologically preparing yourself is the first stage of acceptance. It's one of the stages of acceptance. And once we accept that is the case, because sometimes some parents don't accept it. They don't accept it. I told you, my mom thinks I am 20 years still. She still thinks that I'm her last daughter that's supposed to be home and she has to take care of me and everything like that.
Will always be her baby.
Yeah, when she hear I'm cooking and cleaning and being a wife and career woman and all these things, it's strange for her.
Yes.
And this is where the acceptance come in, that my children are becoming adults and they too would start their life. So we psychologically prepare ourselves for that transition. And you know, the Bible talk about leave and cleave, preparing for that leave and cleave. And we may go through, and in those stages, individuals, it may not be a physical loss or death, but when we talk about grief, that could also be where we go through stages of grief, because we're disconnecting from people in terms of how we may have had that relationship. So we may have questions about, we may have sadness because we have them home with us as it used to be before. We no longer have our babies with us, our children with us. We may be at a place of anger in terms of why he talking about his sons, why my son think that woman is better than their mother. In the sense that they choose a wife and she can't cook, she don't know how to clean, and I used to do this for you and I used to do that for you. So they may be angry about the partner that you choose. They maybe go through that stage of bargaining, of negotiating. Okay, so let's come home by me on these days and I could do this, and you could continue to live home by me, continue to live home by me, and I will still wash and I'll clean and I'll do everything for you guys, and bargaining how I could still keep you nestled under my arm.
Yes.
And we could also reach to that place of acceptance, where we accept that, yes. And just as the stages of grief is not linear, there may be sometimes that we may reach that acceptance and then go back to denial, where I don't believe my child am big enough to leave yet. That is not my reality anytime soon. And we may be at that stage of denial. And this is where we psychologically prepare ourselves for letting go. Letting go that not that our children no longer loves us. It's not that they don't care about us anymore and that we'll be trapped alone by ourselves. As nicely as Miss Forbes shared, she lives alone, but it's not loneliness. They will come, and her family members will come and check her. They will spend time with her. But letting go does not mean that you've lost them. It means that you're allowing them to continue to use the foundation that you provided for them, the values, the upbringing, the morals that you taught, and now start their family with those positive foundation that you would have given onto them. So is that psychological acceptance. And the other thing we do is financial preparedness, because once you're on your own, I'm not saying that we were dependent on our children, but it's preparing for this new transition. So what am I going to do that would keep me occupied, or how could I involve myself in accessing the things that would pique my interest and stimulate my hobbies. So, and these things require finances. So financially preparing yourself, not only depending on the pension, because pension is $3,500, that may not be enough to even fix to even fix a wall if it decides to crack. So taking the opportunity to financially prepare yourself for that transition as well as on terms of a dietary level. We provide a consultation as well as fitness, because our health is very much important, and the way we eat and how we exercise and keep our body active plays an integral role in how strong we will live in our older years and in our current years. So it's about preparation for that time. And it's not just saying, well, I go in and sell my house and I will go and live in a 1-bedroom somewhere, a 1-bedroom apartment, and I wouldn't feel the loneliness because I'm in a smaller space. That's not the case, but looking at what are the varying things that we need to do to prepare for that change. And this is where we don't stay in denial that this is not going to occur, but we do prepare. We do prepare for sure.
Thank you, Keris. I am going to go to the chat and address. I'm seeing it's now 8:07. So, you know, Keris, we would really have to have that part 3 as we were talking about earlier. I am seeing here from the anonymous attendee, as an introvert, how can you open up about struggling with feeling alone or being alone in a marriage with children when your partner isolates or neglects their responsibilities as a parent, especially when you are very private about personal matters? And I saw you were writing. I want to read Natalie's own as well. I have 4 children, 16, 6, 8, and 2.5 years old. I had no choice but to come to a decision to leave my job because of COVID. I told my husband I will start back looking for a work when the baby turns 3 years. I started looking for a job now just to get a break from being home. I am feeling trapped and unappreciated. And there's another one that I can just answer very quickly. Is this session being recorded? And Carol, the answer is yes, it is being recorded. So, Keris, I would leave you to answer those 2, and then I will go on to the other questions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the anonymous individual who would have shared their question, and I assume is a her, based on how the question is phrased, she brought forward 2 concerns. Introvert, so it is emotionally draining to build social connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenges within the marriage, that loneliness within marriage. So I want to talk about the introverted component first. So a person who is an introvert, it takes a lot of energy to maintain social interactions or do social activity. Naturally within themselves, they find more peace in solitude than they would have in terms of being a setting with large crowds that requires a lot of interaction. But it is important for us to understand, again, the definition of what loneliness speaks to. So loneliness is that distressing feeling and the perception that we are not socially connected. So an introvert would have people that they trust, or a person that they trust they're most comfortable with. And when they connect with that individual, they will talk. They will never know this person could talk so much, but that person will know that side of them. Because even though we're introverted, on a public setting, they feel drained interacting with someone. But when they find that person they trust, that they get that opportunity to strengthen that social connection or that social being within them. So there is still interaction amongst individuals who have introverted tendencies, because they would still sustain that, whether it is through that trusted individual or individuals that they may have. And the thing about talking about solitude and combating loneliness, it is not about the quantity, it's not only about the quantity of connection, but it is more important speaking about the quality of those social connectedness and that importance of feeling heard and understood. So even if you don't find delight in forming and forging a lot of friendships, or building and strengthening family relationships outside of your immediate family, of course, because it is important for us to invest in our own family life. We can take the opportunity to see who and what we can do to strengthen that quality of social connection, if you understand what I mean. And oftentimes when you if you remember the why we got into the marriage, maybe your husband was that person who you would have shared that opportunity to build a connection. That person you would have been delighted to. When you see, you feel energized. The person, when you touch, you feel liberated. And if it means that the connection that you want to rebuild is through your husband, then there are ways in which you could combat loneliness as a couple. And some of these things would include that open and that honest communication. So we're jumping into the couple component as well, because you could be in a marriage and feel lonely, but it is looking at how could we move towards combating that loneliness and building a relationship. And it's not only about let's go to couples counseling. It's more than that, because it's a lifestyle that has to be chosen. So one of the first things we always encourage is creating that open and honest communication. And this is why you encourage that open and honest conversations about feelings of loneliness. Share what your needs are. Because men work, when it comes to making decisions, men use half their brain. And in that half of their brain is more directed towards logics. And women use both sides when it comes to making decisions. They use the emotional component of their brain as well as the rationality, the logics, figuring it out. So this is why when women feel stressed, they talk about how I feel. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. But when a man is stressed and has to make a decision, he goes into isolation. And when he goes into isolation, this is where he tries to strategize and think what could be done, removing the, oh my God, this is so stressful and harmful. They'll go into work mode immediately. And this is where the open and honest conversations could come in discussing what these needs are. Because men may not speak about what their needs are, but women may speak it and think that the husband know exactly what they're talking about. So we're discussing the needs, we're discussing what the concerns are, and what's also important is discussing the expectations with our partner. And active listening is very much crucial at this stage, because, or in this setting, because it's very quick for us to pick up defensiveness and go on that protective, defensive nature, because we may feel threatened, because we may share, this is how I feel about it. And when they share their part of how their expectations may be different from you, or their needs may be different from your needs, we may go in defense mode to say, well, I was doing this and I was doing that, and you talking about the wrong thing, and bring up things in the past that you guys probably may have resolved long time, or things that still need to resolve and address, but we're coming from a place of openness and honesty in having this open conversation, discussing what these expectations are, these needs, those concerns. Another thing that is very much important is quality time. So once we have children, it's become very easy for us to forget the relationship that started off in the first place, which is between the husband and wife, or the man and the woman. And well, society evolving, so it may be differently. So quality time is important because we get caught up with parenting, and we foster that family, that parent responsibility, because our children would need our attention. Because you're small, they're vulnerable, and our responsibility to make sure we provide the best care and protection that they need, but we neglect. And there's a difference between focusing on one thing, and there's a difference with prioritizing the different components of our lives, and oftentimes we neglect having a quality time together. So there's a certain individuals suggest this 2-2-2 law. So when we talk about quality time, not every day we may have the opportunity to do something fun and exciting and different, right? But we ensure that we take that opportunity to engage in activities that we both enjoy, that you and your spouse enjoy, and also do something that the other person enjoy as well. So as I was mentioning about the 2-2-2 law, this is where every 2 weeks you go on a date. Every 2 months you do a weekend getaway. And every 2 years you go on a vacation, a couple's vacation away. Might be 7 days, 8 days, those type of vacation. And if you prioritize that, making sure every 2 weeks there's and with each individual it could be different, but what's important is the consistency and prioritizing it as a need. Some persons, because of this,
Can you repeat that again, please?
every 2 weeks you go on a date. Every 2 months you go on a weekend getaway. Every 2 years you go on a vacation together, a couple's vacation. And there's something that in my therapy I would add, especially if marriages are struggling in terms of with intimacy. Every 2 days you guys have some form of intimate connection. And this doesn't only mean sex. It could simply mean he put his head on your lap and you just give him a nice good head massage. It could mean you guys lie down and watch a movie together, and genuinely watch a movie, not the phone next to you guys, and you guys sit down and have a meaningful conversation every 2 days. So intimacy goes beyond just sex. So if you want to add a fourth one, which would be my extra, every 2 days plan intimate activities. So we had days, weeks, months, and years. And then understand each other's interests. So we forget in relationships that we are individuals as well. We get caught up that now I am Mrs. this and Mr. that, and now I'm a family man or a family woman, that we forget we have individual needs. So facilitate time for you as an individual to do things that meet your individual needs, as well as share needs and interests. So in my home, we have calendars stuck up that would help with our planning, because I like to be structured and I need that in front of me. And in our monthly calendar, we have days which we call self-care days. And each member of our family has to choose one day in every 2 weeks to choose whatever they want to do, their own self-care, without worrying about their regular responsibilities. And that goes to my husband has his day, I have my day, and our 2 daughters have their day as well. So one is 6 years and one is 2 years. And I could tell you, my 2-year-old could say, Mommy, I want to go on the beach on my day. And the 6-year-old will say, well, I want to go to Dino World and I want ice cream after, and I want to go and eat X, Y, and Z. So this day is not worrying about the responsibilities, and we take for granted that children too feel pressured and responsible as well. So this is where we deliberately choose it. Once in every 2 weeks, each individual will choose within the month, because there may be we may not be able to do it every all the time, but once a month or once in every 2 weeks, each individual could choose what their day is. So we would set aside, this is what we're going to do. Some things may be for a half a day, some activities may be for the entire day, but it's giving yourself the opportunity to follow what your individual interest is. And as well as shared interest, doing things together as a couple. Affection and appreciation. Learn what is your partner's love language. So I'm watching the time already. I'm talking a lot. Learn what is your partner's love language. So your love language, you could search it up and look at it, what may work for you. So my love language is acts of service. It doesn't mean I don't like gifts, because I love gifts as well. It doesn't mean that I don't like words of affirmation. It simply means that I value above all your acts of service. So finding out what your loved ones' acts of love languages helps you better understand how to respond to them in an affectionate and a loving manner. Seeking professional help, because we may have left it so for a very long time, and the relationship has deteriorated to a point where between ourselves, their friction and that tension, they may not be able to be sustained and sorted out on our own. Seek that professional help. One of the things to also be mindful of is managing our expectations. We may expect our husband to be your daddy. We may expect our husband to be your friend. We may expect him to be our best friend. We may expect him to be everything. And this is where we have to manage those expectations in terms of what could this person really provide for me? And am I expecting so much from them because I feel challenged within myself? So it's managing those expectations. So I guess we're able to cover the introvert part as well as the marriage component. And these things apply also in terms of the second question, where the parent feel that they are trapped and unappreciated, and definitely is prioritizing time for yourself. We have to practice self-love, and we spoke intensely about that in our last session, about practicing self-love and practicing self-care. Because we're accustomed giving, it's hard for us to accept. So ensure that you prioritize time for you. Yes, our children are young, and this is where the support system comes in. It may mean that there may be times that daddy may have to watch the kids, or it may be that you want to leave them by the grandparents, or that particular day they go to some camp that you could get your time off. So it's finding how you could prioritize self-care for yourself. And some people simply, they just take a half an hour, lock in their room, and just take that to self-regulate. Whatever it may look like, prioritize it and stick to it. It is important to fill ourselves up first before we think that we're able to pour, because we will continue to pour from an empty glass. And what would our children be receiving? Our stressful version, our frustrated version. But when we prioritize self-care and self-love, they will get our filled version, our healed version, our joyful version.
And that is so important. We have some more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we are almost out of time. I would just, Marvin is saying, agree, every 2 days, cuddle up, full support, it helps in the marriage. So you can see Marvin is a very lovey person, and that is so nice that he has cuddle time set aside, and that is good. That is excellent. That you can set aside sometimes just to lay and cuddle and just appreciate each other as in the marriage, and as you open up yourself and move away from that loneliness.
And I want to say something because I understand, because I promote the importance. I know we are adults here. If you have children who you are not ready to hear about the birds and the bees, you could tell them, go in their bedroom for 10 seconds and let me speak a little bit and openly about the subject. I promise I won't be disrespectful. But you see, you see, sex in a relationship is important. And once we start feeling lonely in a relationship, the first thing we do is disengage. And disengage means that we stop having sex with the individual. And that's the thing that mashes up a lot of relationship. Because you would ask, when was the last time you guys had sex? About 6 months ago, because I'm sure he's sleeping with this person or he doing this. He had no time for me. He don't love me anymore. Or she don't love me anymore. And when it is two individuals have sex, a lot of things happen, because it's not just a physical activity. It is a strong activity, a spiritual activity, a social activity. The first thing happens, when we talk about blood sacrifice as the highest form of sacrifice that can occur. And when two persons have sex, blood is released in different ways. So within a man's semen, there are traces of blood in it. And then when a woman has an orgasm, the walls of her uterus, the walls of her vaginal tract constricts and it releases blood as well. And in that, when two persons come together, they release, each time you have sex, blood is released, which is a form of sacrifice in its highest form. So that's the first component. Blood is released, which tightens relationship each single time that you come together. And the other thing, in terms of soul ties, are developed and strengthened. So when you talk about soul tie, we're talking about your mind, your will, your emotions. When you connect with this individual, you start to intertwine. And this is why persons, when they're married after a certain period of time, people say, both of you starting to resemble each other. That is soul tie at work, because
Yes.
now these two souls become one. Each time you have sex, and each time you have it, it strengthens that bond. And then our body releases oxytocin. That is the hormone of love. And when oxytocin release, a connection is more formed and function and tied. So if you're having struggles in your relationship and you feel that this person do not understand me, this could never work, I want to put you on a challenge. And I want you guys to have sex every 2 days, if you possibly could, or at least 1 week, once a week. Have sex once a week with your husband, your married person, because I know this is Rescue is promotes certain values, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right? Have that and not just the cuddle. I want you guys to engage in that activity every week, and come back next 6 months and send an anonymous email to Mr. Mark Ferret, or ask to get an email from me through Families in Action, and let me know what happens. Be consistent with it. Do it for 6 months, and let me know how your relationship has developed and how it has grown. Just by doing that. I'm not saying do that alone, because once you start doing that, you realize other behaviors and certain patterns and routines will change. So start by practicing that and see what occurs in the relationship. And with just that person alone, don't go and do it with other people while they're doing it.
We're not promoting fidelity at all. Yeah. and I like what it is he said, because sometimes that happens, and the first thing that jumps to people's mind is that there must be some other third party in the relationship. And sometimes that other party isn't even thinking about another person.
Correct.
Or the person is still very much in love with their spouse, but maybe because they are struggling with their own hurts, their own pain, that is why there is a disconnect, or maybe because that person could be ill, and that too is a struggle for that person, maybe to be intimate, well, in a sexual way. So it doesn't always have to be about a third party, but communicating and understanding that we just need to love each other and to get to the core of what is affecting my partner, which by extension is also affecting me and making me feel lonely. But we just need to openly communicate with each other to find that peace and that joy, as you mentioned. And I am so happy that you mentioned that, because one of my phrases is always, people must be joy-filled. And being joy-filled goes far beyond being happy. Happy, which is just a temporary fix, but joy-filled meaning that even in the midst of all the situations, I can choose to be happy. I can choose joy regardless of whatever I am going through. It is now 8:31. I know that we have touched on so many areas, and I really do hope and pray it was very beneficial to everyone who is listening. My last question to you would be, and I was really hoping, Keris, that we could have done the loneliness assessment session.
Yes.
I really had that down, but the Lord led us where we were supposed to go. So in part 3, I think that I am re-inviting all the persons that are here on this evening, and I am also giving all of you a challenge as well. Invite one person, invite 2 persons, invite 3 persons to also come with you to the next session, because we are going to advertise it as usual, so look out for it and invite someone. Let's share the healing process with each other, and so that our society could become even a better society with persons who aren't suffering from loneliness and depression. My last question to you as we wrap up, Keris, is how prevalent is loneliness in society?
Well, it's quite prevalent based on different age groups. So, for example, let me just make sure I pull up the right information, because I don't want to provide misinformation.
Yes.
Loneliness is quite a common experience, and so on an international level, 80% of persons who are under the age of 18 years of age, they experience some form of loneliness. And after they come out of that stage of 18 years, you would recognize that 40% of adults that are over the age of 65 indicated that they too have been experiencing loneliness at some time of their life. And you realize that the levels of loneliness gradually dismisses through the middle adult years, and probably because individuals are starting their own family or they're building their career, so they're focusing on self-development, etc. So you see that percentage decreases. But loneliness is a common experience. So there is where loneliness may come in different types and different forms. So it may just be situational loneliness, where you may have lost a loved one, you may came out of a bad breakup, you may move into a new city. So there may be a situational loneliness. There may be that emotional or that social loneliness. But the impact of loneliness is dependent on the severity in which the consequences may lead to how we react to it. So this is where we may take the opportunity when we experience feelings of loneliness, we take the opportunity to look at what could I do to combat those emotions, combat those feelings, or to deal with the cause of loneliness and build our own coping strategies and our own coping system. So the severity doesn't become too much for us, that we are at a place where we feel that we don't have the support or the strength within ourselves to overcome these feelings of loneliness. And coping is most important. So this is where you could build your support networks. And again, support network isn't always about friends and family. It is important for us to take the opportunity to not wait for other people to reach out to us, but we reach out to them. We may have a friend from since our primary school days or secondary school days, where we just take the opportunity to check them up on Facebook and to connect. We may have some people who may live abroad. Just connect with individuals, connect to the people that we love or a relationship we would have valued in the past, and make that effort to maintain and strengthen those existing relationships that we may have. Even in terms of widen and join different support groups, as which we would have spoken about before. And even if you can't do that, volunteer somewhere. Find out if there's a homework center in your area that you could assist with. Volunteer with Red Cross, volunteer with Girls Guide, Boy Scout, volunteer with some group in your community or some international NGO that you want to provide support in. Volunteer, so in that way you could build that support network that you have. Also consider therapy or counseling, because once we're at a place where we feel that we don't have the strength to manage it on our own, this is where a qualified therapist or counselor can help guide us through, and as well as utilize the different community resources we have available. So I know we have Find Care TT. On their website, they have a crisis support directory. So this would be all the different listing of contact numbers of NGOs, helpline, hotlines that helps us to access what is available here in Trinidad and Tobago. Because one of the things that we do recognize that depending on the severity of loneliness, we may have those suicidal ideation and suicidal intent. And they have suicidal helplines, hotline, if it is we are thinking about suicide prevention, as well as what are different NGOs that may provide counseling for free, and a vast array of stuff, because some of the side effects of loneliness may lead to substance abuse. There's Alcoholic Anonymous. There may be Gambling Anonymous, because there may be challenges with spending, because we want to cover our loneliness with gambling and spending and spreeing. So we may have that gambling challenges as well. So there's a lot of information available for within this website with the contact information and directory. And really invest in self-help and self-care practices. Find hobbies, find things that you're interested in, exercise, release those endorphins in your body. It makes you feel good, it makes you happy. Practice self-compassion, forgive, and I reiterate, forgive. Forgiveness is a cancer that cripples us, that causes us to go into isolation in a negative way. Forgive those who've hurt us and live and let live, as well as even limit our social media activity, because we tend to get lost in the cyber world and disconnect from real physical in-person relationships. As well as journal your thoughts. Write it down. Share how you feel. Get it out through writing or through the different creative ways, whether you want to do drawing. Get it out in that way. Some people do gardening and talk to their plants, and they give the plants love and attention. The plants grow even faster. So look at these things in terms of building that self-care package that you may need. And one thing even as we wrap up, I want to just share that, remember that dealing with loneliness is a process. It isn't a one fix all, and it is essential to be patient with ourselves in the process. And it may take time to develop new relationships and find the support that we actually need. But additionally, if loneliness is persistent and it is negatively affecting our own well-being, we must consider seeking that professional help that we may need, and that could come in the form of therapy or counseling to address the underlying issues that we may not even realize contributing towards the loneliness. So when it is we ultimately combine the building of the support networks and seeking that professional assistance when necessary and practicing the self-help and the self-care practices, it helps us to cope with loneliness and to work towards really building a more fulfilling and connected life. So I want to hand back over to you.
Thank you so very much, Carice, and I really enjoyed this evening's session. I know that it was going to be a very dynamic and impactful session because we kept saying it. So there it is. The reality has unfolded this evening. And I want to thank everyone present here for attending this gift from WESCU's Board of Directors as we celebrate International Credit Union Month and International Credit Union Day. We found it fit that we should give our membership and the wider community this gift of mental health and the impact and also what it means for your well-being as an individual and as a family as well. So I want to admonish all of you to remember that fear cripples you. If you are fearful of being vulnerable, it cripples you and it imprisons you. Sometimes we just need to be brave enough, irregardless of rejection. And rejection does not mean that something is wrong with you. Sometimes people may reject you because of their own insecurities, their own loneliness. So sometimes we just need to be brave enough to open ourselves regardless if we are fearful of being rejected. And always remember as I close, we are never alone. We have God at our side, and we need also to build that personal, intimate relationship with our God and talk to him as a friend. Sometimes we only pray because we want. Sometimes I talk to God and I say, somebody may say something that it's out of timing or it's totally irrelevant. And I would ask him, I say, you heard that? You heard what that person just said? Or behavior. And then I turn and I say, so what are you going to do about it? Because that is your friend. Don't only look as God is up here and he is unreachable. He's your friend. So you can talk with him, empty yourself with him, as Kerry said, in the garden, and you're taking care of your plants, and that is so true. The plants grow even more beautifully. Talk to your plants, you're in your garden, talk to your God. Let him know exactly how you feel, because sometimes we want to mask how we feel, thinking that God doesn't already know. Wow. Right? So I want to thank all of you for being here. And remember that you are never alone. God did promise that he will never leave us, nor would he ever forsake us. I look forward to seeing all of you here. And remember the challenge, in addition to Carice's challenge, that I want you to invite someone else or two other persons to our part 3 of mental health matters. We had the first one, the impact of mental health. This one deal with the entanglement of loneliness, and it might be the entanglement of loneliness part 2, part 3 of mental health matters. So thank you so much, Carice. Thanks very much for the EAP Families in Action. Thank you very much, the Board of Directors of Western United Credit Union, who truly cares about the holistic growth and development of its members' families, the friends, the wider community, and the world. And someone is asking, how do you reach out for counseling? You can easily visit our WestQ website and you will find the relevant information there. My right-hand man, Mr. Trevlon Hall, I want to thank him very much for always stepping up to the plate and ensuring that we have an excellent webinar, and he would ensure that you get the necessary information so you can reach out to Carice or myself. People, thank you very much for attending, and I wish all of you a good night. And remember, you are never alone. Have a good evening.